Morning, it's Joe Waxman, and I'm back with another mini reading. This morning, I wanted to look at the chart of poet and author Sylvia Plath. I studied writing for a little bit in grad school. I didn't graduate, but I took some writing courses, creative writing courses, and I got into it somewhat, but realized that that the whole academia wasn't really for me. But anyway, I got really into Sylvia Plath's work. She's an excellent poet and author, mainly a poet. That was the main thing. And her poems are extremely powerful, often dark, but like deep, and just mesmerizing. I love them. I'm not going to read any of her poetry here, but I highly recommend you read them. Daddy stands out to me as one of my favorites. There were a couple others that were really good. I'm going to share my screen. So Sylvia Plath, October 27th, 1932, 2:10 p.m., Boston, Mass. Now, Sylvia had a lot of issues with depression. She was suicidal. She tried to kill herself many times. She ended up in the psych ward. And eventually she did kill herself. She was only age 30, but she gained quite a lot of notoriety. I mean, she's one of the most successful poets of all time. So let's look at her chart. All right. So, I mean, right off the bat, Sun in Scorpio and Mercury in Scorpio. I mean, Scorpio, we know this is the darkest sign. Scorpio rules the depths. It's ruled by Mars and Pluto. Pluto being the god of Hades. Mars is, the god of war, rules Aries, but here it just brings this deep passion and intensity. I just wanted to bring in a side note. This is just about the differences between the co-rulers, because some modern astrologers will be like, well, Pluto rules Scorpio, we don't deal with Mars and all that, or Uranus rules Aquarius, Neptune rules Pisces. But the difference between the old rulers and the modern rulers is this, that Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are outer planets, and we can't really see them with the naked eye. We can see Uranus to some extent, but the energetic influence is that these are more spiritual planets, and they don't necessarily represent physical manifestations, whereas the closer planets like Mars can actually represent physical people in our life. For instance, Mars can rule older siblings. So we can have an older sibling that is actually representative in our chart as Mars, especially males, and it can rule males in general, especially more aggressive masculine males. Uranus has an interesting position in that sometimes we can see it with the naked eye and sometimes we can't. And that Uranian events are like that. Like all of a sudden, like there'll be a sudden sudden event that happens in your life, like car crash, bam, that's Uranus showing up. And then Uranus will disappear and then we won't see it. And then another event will happen, like bam, like somebody will just come into our life, like all of a sudden, and play a really big role. And then they might leave really quickly again. That's Uranus. Neptune doesn't have anything like that. Neptune rules delusion, confusion, drugs, alcohol, spirituality. You could be like chasing something that turns out to not even exist. That's the kind of thing that Neptune represents, but it usually doesn't represent a person, right? You're not going to meet a person in your chart that represents Neptune. Neptune will represent delusion and fantasy, spirituality, creativity, things like that. Pluto, the same thing. You're not going to find a Pluto person in your life, and you're not going to meet Pluto as an event. It could be a very spread out series of events, but Pluto is going to be much more psychological, and it could create mental disturbances, and it can create chaos in your life in a very vague sense, but you're not going to be able to pinpoint exactly what it is like you can with Uranus. Uranus can be a car crash, right? Uranus can be a sudden event. Pluto is going to be not so concentrated. It's going to be much more spread out, but it's going to have this effect of transforming you through crisis and pain. Anyway, so I just wanted to delineate those two things, that we look to the lords of the signs in different ways. Mars will be the physical manifestation of Scorpio, whereas Pluto will be the spiritual manifestation of Scorpio. Same with Aquarius. Uranus will be more of the spiritual side, the spiritual manifestation of Uranus, and Saturn will be more the physical manifestation. Same for Pisces. Neptune will be the spiritual manifestation. Jupiter will be the physical manifestation. And just another quick example, I just need to explain the difference of how these things work. You know, if your ascendant ruler, if your ascendant is in Scorpio, Mars and Pluto being the rulers, if Mars goes into the 12th house, you might actually live in a foreign land, because that's ascendant lord in the foreign, in the 12th house. So like might live in a foreign land, or you might be in and out of hospitals and jails and mental asylums, or solitary confinement, solitary something, 12th house issues, right? Or you might be deeply involved in spirituality or creativity. But if Pluto goes there, you could just feel alone, like you could just be isolated and not actually be in a foreign land. You might just feel foreign from everyone, or you might, you know, spiritually be isolated, or spiritually, you know, like energetically be disconnected, energetically be, you know, have a very creative spirit to you, but not necessarily in a physical sense. Like it would just have a more energetic influence. So like that. So I just want to clarify that, you know, the difference, the way these two influences happen with the rulership of the signs. Anyway, so, you know, all this stuff with like, you know, depression and suicide and all that. Okay, first off, that's the first clue. There's plenty of other clues, but also just this depth. And if you've read any of her poetry, you know what I'm talking about. Just like this scorpionic depth and intensity and darkness and power, right? And it's coming into the 9th house. This is the 8th house by quadrant, but 9th sign, and it's influencing the 9th house heavily. I mean, 8th house is no less going to, you know, weaken the effect, because that'll bring that even more depth and power. But the 9th house is ruling her beliefs, right? That's her Jupiter. That's her original Jupiter house, Sag, in the natural zodiac. So this really dampening her enthusiasm, really bringing it down, and like creating a lot of depression, because 9th house is a house of luck. It's a house of wisdom, philosophy, religion, higher mindedness. And with all the Scorpio here, Sun and Mercury, it's like such a downer. Her Jupiter, her enthusiasm, her faith is taking a beating, right? It's just like crush, 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 crush. That's not the only thing, right? Look at her moon. It's in the 8th house by quadrant, right? By sign, we have Virgo, which we'll get to, but by quadrant. And they both have influence, right? We have to look at shades of gray and look at signs and houses as separate influences, right? Whole sign works and it has influence. If we look at whole sign, this is the 8th house. If we look at quadrant house, this is the 8th house. But anyway, Moon in Libra, besides being in the 8th house, is really nice complement to Scorpio, because, well, it's the 12th house, so there's a bit of disconnect there. But for creative purposes, I mean, if you look at her writing, I read her novel, The Bell Jar, and her poetry, it adds a buoyancy to the depth of Scorpio. It adds a light, airy intellectuality, which is very refreshing, and it's so nice. Libra can be very you know, cerebral and like intellectual and literary, right? Because it's cardinal air, so it has that ability to be so, you know, great with words, great with, you know, anything having to do with, you know, like that whole thing, like the realms of the mind. And it's very light. Libra is very light, and that lightness provides real nice contrast to the depth and heaviness. And it brings in a humor. Like there's a certain kind of humorous quality to her writing, which I love. I just find it fascinating. Like humor in death is a brilliant combination. This humor, this lighthearted, quality that she handles so well being a female. This lighthearted female who's just at the same time going into the depths of hell. Me being Scorpionic, I greatly appreciate it. I'm also air as well, air heavy. So this is a really interesting, fascinating combination, and it definitely contributes to her depression as well. 8th house moon, not a great place. Moon does not like being in Scorpio. It's the original house of Scorpio by quadrant. Anyway, so, opposite Scorpio is opposite Taurus, where it's exalted. So this moon in the 8th has a debility. It's afflicted. We could say there's definitely an affliction here. It's not the only symbol, not the only affliction to her moon or that sort of thing. We'll get to that. But I want to look at this. Okay, let's first look at the ascendant, because that's next on the list. In my order, I like to do sun, moon, ascendant. So just at the edge of Aquarius, right? Another air sign, Aquarius, brilliant, out of the box, unique, original thinker. Love Aquarius, of course. Who doesn't love Aquarius? We all gotta love Aquarius. High-minded, think about society and all sorts of stuff. Just very big, very big, very big energy, Aquarius. And by quadrant, 12th lord is also in Aquarius, but Saturn's in Capricorn, and Saturn does great in Capricorn because it's his rulership and it creates a lot of discipline, hard work. And she was an excellent student, by the way, and that's probably a lot of that has to do with Saturn in Capricorn, but also, just in general, just the water and, I think it has a lot to do with Saturn and Capricorn because it made her a hard worker. Scorpio has potential to be brilliant, and so does, Libra moon, but it really depends on so much else and all this Virgo stuff. But with Saturn here, that definitely gives her the discipline to work really hard and develop her potential to the highest. But the other thing is that this is the 12th sign. It's not the 12th house, this is the 12th sign, because Aquarius is the first sign, Capricorn is the 12th sign. So by whole sign, it would say first lord and 12th house. And what that tells me is that she's going to spend time in foreign lands or in hospitals, mental hospitals, asylums, in creativity, spirituality. And that's true. She was in mental hospitals, right? How else would we see that besides a 12th house planet? I guess some Pisces placements, but more 12th house. I definitely don't consider Pisces to necessarily be the sign of being in a mental hospital. That's really, I would look to the 12th house for that. So if you're, classical, Hellenistic, astrologer, or Vedic, this would be first lord and 12th house, right? Well, but then they're looking at, in tropical zodiac anyway. But so that's interesting, right? And Saturn is restriction, and so there's definitely a relation there. But I think just generally this made her very hardworking and made her a great student. Made her reach her potential, at an early age, because it brought a lot of discipline to her. Okay, let's move right along. This heavy Virgo stellium, come on. Intellect, South Node, Neptune, Jupiter, and Venus. I included both the the true node and the mean node, because I love the true node because it's true, but I love the mean node because it's mean. And sometimes you got to be true, and sometimes you got to be mean, and sometimes you got to be true and mean. So I include both the true and the mean, just to get a different, you know, different perspective. Because sometimes the mean node can mean more than the true node, even though the true node is true. Anyway, South node Venus and Jupiter. I mean, I have South node conjunct Jupiter in the 7th house. And South node conjunct Jupiter is like just wisdom, like, you know, not me, just in general. Like, and it's so exact, so tight. It showed like a great, like she had access to wisdom. Like she just did. She had a higher mind that was very wise. Virgo is a tough sign because it's normally rules the 6th house and so much, so critical, so sharp-minded. It's like razor blades, like Virgo. If you want to think about Virgo, it's like 2 razor blades slicing and dicing and cutting and, you know, just going at it with razor blades. It's like death by 1,000 cuts, right? Like 6th and 8th house. These are the 2 malefic houses. You know, Scorpio is death by poison, death by venomous sting. Virgo is death by 1,000,000, you know, little cuts. Okay, which would you rather have? I mean, take your poison, pick your poison. Anyway, so Virgo is definitely very intense, and Venus here is in Virgo. It's debilitated in Virgo because it's exalted in Pisces, and this tells me that it also describes what kind of partner she's going to get. So she did have she married Ted Hughes, who's a fellow poet, right? And we can see that South node Jupiter. South node would ruin the relationship, but Jupiter protects it. So there is potential here. But then Venus in Virgo says that it's not really going to be good because Venus is generally an indicator of relationships. And if it's in the 7th house, even more so. And being debilitated here means there's going to be issues, and there was issues. It was a very unhappy marriage. He abused her. They had 2 children, but we can see that it's not going to be a good relationship. However, incredibly intelligent. South node Venus, you know, even though Venus is debilitated, conjunct the South node still shows a lot of skills, a lot of critical skills when it comes to like artistry and writing. Virgo's ruled by Mercury, you know, so the dispositors, you know, in Scorpio, very dark, very heavy, but very critical, very intellectual, right? It's not going to be a happy Venus, you know, but it's still smart as can be, right? And literary and intellectual and still benefic. And it reflects back on her ascendant. So, you know, all the planets have these 7th aspect, you could say like projection, like shadow, right? The opposite, the polarity point. And it's exalting in her ascendant, right? So it's reflecting back on her as a person, less on her partner, more on her. So whenever you see planets in the 7th house, if they're debilitated, it shows a weaker partner, and it shows that you can attract weaker people, and it reflects good on you, right? So also, this shows that she had this great ability to reach people, because 7th house is one-on-one relationships, but it's also the masses of people. And with Jupiter here especially, but also Venus is debilitated, but South node Neptune, also the house of creativity, but it shows that she could reach people, because 10th house or MC is where you're seen. 7th house is where you're heard. And for people who are musicians or motivational speakers, or people who need to reach the masses through a connection, through a vocal connection, speaking, being heard, that's very much 7th house. So that's one of the reasons she was so popular. And she is, to this day, one of the most popular poets, right? And a lot of that has to do with these planets, the South node, Jupiter, Neptune, and even Venus. Here, there's a lot of pain that we feel in her writing. That's Scorpio, 8th house, debilitated Venus. And so this actually would be this, it's the 6th house, but it's the 7th sign. So 6th house Mars would be somebody who's just a fighter, who's great at, like, you know, defeating their enemies, and just has a lot of fight in them. But if it's in the 7th house, which is having that influence as well, we looked, you know, 7th, you can see 7th, 8th influence here, and then 6th, 7th influence here. Mars in the 7th shows it's not good for partnership. That's not good. It shows that she was very bossy and dominating in partnership, but also shows she's going to get somebody who's very aggressive and egotistical. Both, right? By the way, descendant on fixed star Regulus, that actually is probably pretty powerful. And, you know, I think her husband was Ted Hughes. So he was a prominent figure. Just want to make sure. Ted Hughes. Yeah, so he was a famous poet. So we're getting that here with Regulus on the descendant, like somebody who's a star in themselves, right? And Jupiter, South Node Jupiter, somebody who's like a guru, a teacher to her. But this is not good for relationships. Great in the 6th house though. And again, disposited by Sun in Scorpio. So again, not good. Like it's leading to very dark feeling, dark faith, dark higher mind. All right. And then let's look at this. It's just compounding, right? Pluto and Cancer. Cancer is the sign of the mother, the sign of the, you know, domestication, the sign of the early childhood development. And Pluto and Cancer is pushing off this whole, like, you know, the original, like, you know, nuclear family. I mean, it's still carried in further, but it was the original impetus for that, like the, you know, women being at home, just, you know, rearing a family, not doing anything with their life. Pluto here is rejecting that, you know, rebelling against that. Not so much the sign of rebellion as it is the sign of fundamental decay and destruction and rebirth, right? And it's in the 5th house, so 5th house is the house of creativity, but she was not happy to be a housewife, right? With her 2 kids. That was not something that she could. Pluto rules death, right? It's very telling. And it tells about her, anything in Cancer will relate to early childhood development, as does moon placements. But Pluto here is really adding into the whole theme of her being depressed after she got married and had kids. I honestly don't think she should have been married and had kids. Like, you know, if somebody were like advising her and guiding her life, you know, who really understood these things, they should have told her, like, look, you're not a motherly type. Don't have kids. You have a powerful Pluto in Cancer, and it's trining your, you know, the Sun and Mercury and Scorpio in the 9th house. I mean, this is great for writing because Mercury rules writing, right? So Pluto trine Scorpio, giving her that depth and power. I mean, Pluto trine Mercury and Scorpio, it's just making it so much deeper and scorpionic. My gosh, right? And then Pluto square Uranus. Uranus is the planet of sudden events, right? Sudden death. No wonder she's always trying to kill herself. Squares bring out the worst quality of the planets in general, right? I like to think that Saturn and Capricorn can mitigate the negative effects of squares, but I think there's too much heaviness in her chart, too much Scorpio, dampening her enthusiasm, 8th house moon, just just really difficult negative stuff here. Not only that, but she has a special, sorry, wrong thing. Look, okay, no out of bounds planets, but the speed of Pluto, -5 seconds, stationary, retrograde. Pluto is stationary, right? Retrograde or direct, you know, not as important as the fact that it's stationary. That means this Pluto is highly potent, the most potent, right? It's so powerful, this Scorpio. So that this theme of death and suicide was so strong in her life that and depression. I mean, she tried to kill herself so many times, and finally she developed the courage to, or according to her, you know, I mean, she died with her head in the oven, but she tried so many different ways. I mean, like slicing her wrists, like popping pill, like overdosing on pills, right? Eventually she died with her head in the oven, and her 2 little kids were in the other room, sealed off. So very sad, very sad. But we can see that, right? But it also gave her poetry such tremendous potency. Here we have Pluto trying that debilitated Venus, incredibly powerful Pluto trying the debilitated Venus. And then, you know, sextile. And then Pluto trying the Mercury sextile Venus. And then the south node Jupiter, Neptune is still playing into that. And this, this just makes it, the square to Uranus in the second house just adds like the shocking quality, inspiring shocking quality, because Uranus in Aries is inspirational. So it's just really dynamic. We've got a trine to the Mars, making her, Uranus and Mars together is just kind of like explosive action, right? Just giving her that fighting, courage to even try and kill herself. Just, it's not a good thing, but we have to make sense of it somehow. And then let's see, Chiron in the third house. Third house would relate to writing, her expression, her creativity, her creative skills of the hands. Chiron's painful. Chiron's opposite, a little bit of a wide orb, but it's still opposite Mercury. So we're bringing in this pain, this depth and rejection. And go read Daddy. Really, like, you'll get it. You'll get how, like, where all this stuff is coming from. Chiron's the wounded healer, wounded reject, just painful. Mercury and Scorpio in the 9th, opposite Chiron in the 3rd. Jeez. Sextile to that extremely potent Pluto opposite Saturn. Pluto and Saturn together is such a heavy combination. And oppositions usually are not that great, because they're in relationship. They come out in relationship. So when we relate to others, we have this dynamic experience of oppositions. And Pluto and Saturn really just like make somebody so serious and heavy. And this being her creative, the creative house of creativity, fuels her writing to a large degree, and just makes it so serious and heavy and deep and destructive. And Pluto is going to challenge Saturn, and Saturn is going to just deepen and strengthen and draw out, like, make Pluto more, hardworking and intense. They're both gonna just, do a number on each other. Pluto's going to make sure that Saturn is acting in its highest capacity, because it's just going to decay it again and again and again. And Saturn is just going to dry out and starve Pluto and make it work its ass off. They're just like two, like a rock and a hard place, just like very, very intense, difficult opposition, but like creates incredible, I guess, maturity, you could say, responsibility. Very, very responsible together. What else? What else? That's pretty much it. She did not live long enough to have the eclipse. I mean, Rahu in the first, North Node in the first, I have North Node in the first. Until you reach maturity, Rahu maturity at age 42, this is a doozy. It really is. It just confuses the hell out of you, because Rahu's eclipse, North Node is eclipse. It casts an eclipse on your identity. You don't know who you are. And in first house, mostly in Pisces, she's going to be confused about who she is anyway. This is just delusion, confusion, delusion, just mass delusion, just total delusion. And, drug addiction, potentially. I don't think she was a drug addict, but it just, she was just highly confused. And if she had lived long enough to be like above age 42, she would have had a much different perspective on life. But she didn't, sadly. And the nodes are squaring her MC, and any squares to the nodes show a fated events in life. So this to me shows notoriety, fame, right? Fated fame, because North Node, MC is recognition by the public recognition, fame. And Sagittarius is also a good fame indicator because it's fire, just fire signs in general. Aries, Leo. Leo is the most famous indicator. Aries, Sag, Leo. Anyway, so yeah, that tells me that she was destined for fame to some extent anyway. Fated events, destined events are squares to the nodes. Yep. Good or bad. So that's pretty much it. I think this we get a good idea of the power, the depth, the potency, the literary ability of Sylvia Plath, and why she was depressed, and I just noticed this grand earth trine. That's nice. Just really adds to her intelligence, her practical writing skills, and her hard work, diligence. She was an excellent student. But Mars square Mercury. That's a very edgy kind of, it's adding to her writing style, and it's creating a lot of tension with Mars here. Mars is ruling her. Oh yeah, Sun and Mars are in each other's houses, and we get the square aspect to Mercury, so creating like adding an aggressive element to her writing style and to her mind, making her mind more aggressive. And violence, and if we take this to be the seventh sign, so an indicator of her husband, then, we're getting abuse here, square to the Mercury. This is more mental abuse, but Mars is physical, so physical and mental abuse. and wide square to Chiron, but again, same theme. That's definitely painful, very painful aspect relating to husband or just in daily life in general. Unhappy, just fighting, a lot of fighting, verbal fighting, and painful fighting that leads to a lot of pain. All right, so that's pretty much what I got for Sylvia Plath. I encourage you to check out some of her poems. Powerful writer. Very sad that she died young, very sad for her children especially. But if you like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, share. Go to my website, macroastrology.com, to book a reading. Thanks, and I will see you guys soon.